Namaste and welcome to today's session. Today I have something interesting to talk about. And maybe one could probably say that it's also maybe difficult for some people because it may challenge um, a very strongly held belief. So there may be some resistance to maybe listening to what I'm about to say. And but before I start talking about whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to give like a brief cautionary note that this is what I'm going to talk about, and if it challenges your, or it's going to make you, it's going to push, likely to push your buttons, then maybe this session is not for you. Okay. So before we start discussing and talking about whatever I'm going to talk about, so let's start off with a small sitting practice. The sitting practice is nothing but guided meditation in simple terms. I don't like the word meditation because it's got so many connotations. In fact, in Zen, they don't really call it meditation. They just call it sitting because it's simple. Because all we are doing is just really sitting and not really doing anything, or not even attempting to meditate. We are not even attempting to stop thinking. We are not even attempting to um, use this practice to achieve something in the future, because we are not really attempting anything of that sort. So it's really just sitting. That's all. There's nothing more to it. Sometimes the simplest things has become the most difficult thing for us humans to do, which is just really sit still, do nothing, and be comfortable with that. So let's start off with a short sitting practice, and then we'll talk about something. Okay. So take a nice, long, deep breath in and exhale. And sit comfortably wherever you are. Mm. Just ensure that your spine is erect, not for any other reason, so that there is a certain degree of alertness while you're sitting. You don't have to be stiff, and at the same time, you don't have to be too lax. Just the right attitude to a sitting practice, a relaxed alertness. You can place your hands wherever you wish, wherever you feel comfortable, in whatever posture you feel comfortable. The idea is to take a position where you're unlikely to move for some time. The body can be comfortably still. Because in order to bring some degree of stillness to the mind, first the container, the body, has to be also still. Now, the first thing I would say is cultivate this feeling of surrender, of letting go, of just being. For some, it's easy to let go and surrender. For some, the mind keeps chattering with some thoughts or the other. And that's fine. Perhaps one way that you can let go and surrender is to give up the notion of being a doer with every exhalation. As you inhale, energize yourself. And as you exhale, let go. Inhale, feel the incoming breath. Exhale, let go. Inhale, exhale, let go. And if there are still some thoughts lingering in the mind, then just watch the mind, observe the mind, witness the mind, and see what thoughts are playing in the mind. When we begin to watch the mind and the thoughts, you notice that the thoughts begin to disappear and vanish. Keep watching the mind. If there are not many thoughts, then just be with what is. Being with what is essentially means being with life happening in this moment. The breath, the sensations in the body. The movement of the body as you breathe in, as you breathe out. The sounds around you. Begin to notice that this life expressing itself in the form of Body sensations, breath, movement, sounds is happening by itself. There is no person who's making either of this happen. The body is still, the eyes are closed, and even as the body is still, the eyes are closed, life is happening by itself. Breath, sensations, movement of the body, sounds. No one is doing any of this. It's happening by itself. And all of this that is happening by itself, the breath, sensations, sounds, movement, is getting registered by something. Something is listening to the sound. Something is experiencing the sensation, the breath, the movement. This something is not a person. This something seems to be something which cannot be described in words. At best, one can say this something is space, this something is silence, this something is emptiness, in which the registering of all life phenomena is happening. So, in stillness of body and the stillness of mind, the realization occurs that life is happening by itself. And life is being experienced also by itself. There is no person making life happen, and there is no person experiencing life. Life has no purpose, no goal, no agenda. It's simply happening. Similarly, the awareness of life has no purpose, no goal, no agenda. It is simply happening too. This realization is a state of pure being, pure awareness, pure silence, pure stillness. your presence, your consciousness, your existence. Different words referring to the same thing. There is no person in this moment. There is only presence. There is no purpose in this moment. There is only existence. There is nothing missing and incomplete in this moment. There is only the fullness of being. In this silence and stillness, there is no decider, chooser. There is no one doing any action. There is no experiencer. There is no thinker. There is no feeler. There is no perceiver. And yet, all these functions are happening by themselves. Sensations are happening. Feelings are happening. Breath is happening. Movement is happening. Even thoughts could be happening by themselves. Rest in this silent presence of being for a few minutes in silence and stillness. So remember, even after we come out of the sitting practice, we can get in touch with this realization that life is happening by itself and is being experienced by itself. At any point of time. All one needs to do is come back into presence. One can do that by taking a pause, or bringing awareness to whatever one is doing in the moment. It requires stilling the mind, because the mind creates the belief that there is a person who's doing something. In the silence of the mind, the realization that life is happening by itself and experienced by itself grows. And that is the primary spiritual practice. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Another deep breath in. And exhale. Slowly and gently at your own time, at your own pace. Gently rub your palms and cup your eyes. Okay. So welcome back. I hope the sitting practice was helpful in experiencing some silence in the mind, some gap between the thought, some glimpses of being, presence. And there is no such thing as a good sitting practice or a bad sitting practice. I think the value of the sitting practice is to create a habit and a discipline of doing it as often as we can. And one need not always sit to come into presence. One can come into presence even in our day-to-day activities. Okay, so let's talk about what I want to talk about today, which is actually in some way connected to the sitting practice, if you would have noticed. So I'm going to talk about the topic for today is, do we have free will? Now, if you are someone who is really has a strong belief in free will, then perhaps this session may create some resistance in you. And then you may choose whether you really want to, listen to this session or not, because my intent is not to convince somebody or enlighten somebody, but the space that I'm coming from is sharing something of my own realization and something that has, um, I wouldn't even say worked for me, but it's just something that has been my realization. So that's what we are going to talk about today. In one of the previous sessions, I spoke about overcoming anxiety. And if we look at one of the primary reason we feel anxious is because we feel that we are a separate person, and we believe that we must not do the wrong thing, or we believe we are not doing enough, and we believe others are judging us, and often we are judging our own self. So this belief that I am a person who is doing things out using my free will and choice, and I may not be doing enough, or I may be doing the wrong thing, and I may be judging, I may be judged by others, I am judging myself. That is the cause of really the anxiety. So, whenever this topic is brought up in the sense that do we really have free will? Hmm? Then then the question comes, oh, is everything is destiny, or do we have, this whole debate between destiny and free will starts. So the intent of this is not to get into a conceptual debate, because even free will is a concept, it's just two words. Even destiny is a concept. And then one can get into an intellectual debate about this, which is never ending. And generally, when this debate comes in, what you will generally have three schools of thought. There's one school of thought which will say that yes, we have free will, and we can exercise our free will to do something with our lives, and we can exercise our willpower, make effort, strive, work hard, achieve something, achieve our goals, and celebrate our success. And that's really the model with which most human beings are working. That I am a person, an individual who exercises choice and free will, and I can do something with my life, and I can make things happen according to how I want them to. And then, if I'm able to achieve my goals and success, then there is recognition, reward, celebration. And generally, if we are not able to, then we perhaps say there were circumstances beyond my control, that I was not able to do whatever I tried to do, or maybe I didn't do enough. Then we may find different reasons for not being able to achieve what we thought. And that's uh, the common thought process. And there's another school of thought which is like a midway house, which says that. um that yes, there is an element of free will, but the free will is limited. The choices are limited. You don't have infinite, unlimited choices. Like right now, if you're in a certain place, then you can only exercise some choices based on where you are. The most common given example, one of the teachers I've heard say that um, your height is your destiny and your weight is your free will. So that's one way of putting it, which is we have only a certain limited of ability to control our circumstances using free will. And there are many things that are beyond our control, where we are born, and maybe some significant life events, where we live, what we do, who we marry. That's all part of kind of destiny. One can call that karma or whatever. And then there's another school which says that no, everything is happening according to God's will. There's a statement, even if a single leaf falls from a tree, that is also God's will. Now, one needs to inquire deeply, what are these people saying? What is God? because that's really important. Because we often believe God is something which is separate from us, and I am a separate person, and God is a separate person based on my thoughts. And then God is sort of controlling the whole universe, and I have some control over some part of my life. So there are these three schools of thought which say that yes, there's free will, there is some limit of free will, and then the other is everything is happening according to how it's meant to be. But let's look at, I think, whenever people ask me in my sessions that, okay, what about, eventually this uh, F word question comes, which is the free will part at some point of time in the conversation. Then if you're saying that there is really no person and the person is just a figment of our mind, a concept of the mind based on the memory of the past and imagination of the future, then do we really have free will or not? Mm. So generally, I share that there are three things that I talk about, which sort of indicate that this whole notion of free will happens when we think, or when the thought creates a person who believes he is thinking, who is choosing, who's deciding, who is doing. And even otherwise, without all of this, life is happening like we just practice right now. When you're sitting still, when you're doing nothing, the breath is happening by itself. The bodily functions are happening by itself. The sensations are happening by themselves. The movement of the body is happening by itself. No one is doing anything, but life was happening. And life is also getting experienced by something, which is not this individual, this person, that so and so person, this who's experiencing it. Life is happening and life is experiencing itself. But when we sort of get out of the sitting practice, we start moving, and then we start doing some cooking, we do some cleaning, we do some writing. Then we say, oh, I am cooking, oh, I am cleaning, I am, we say, I am doing something. The notion of doership comes. So let's look at free will from a perspective of, first and foremost, let's look at it scientifically. And the scientific way of looking at free will is, what does science essentially do? Science essentially examines everything through uh, cause and effect. That if this is a cause, then this is the effect of the cause. If the cause and effect is established, then that over multiple experiments, and then that becomes a theory, a scientific theory, because this causes this causes this is the cause for this. So cause and effect. All scientific theory is based on cause and effect, examining what causes what. So if you were to look at any action that we do in a given moment, let's say in this given moment you are listening to this video, this recording, wherever you may be listening, on your phone, on your laptop. So what was the cause for this action to happen? What caused this action? Now, you can say what caused this action was that I am part of your list. So I get these weekly updates of what you're posting. And I saw that on WhatsApp and I clicked on the link and I came onto your YouTube channel, or I saw this posted on Facebook, and then I clicked on this, and then so this action that you're doing right now, which is listening to this recording, the cause for that was the previous action. Then one can ask, okay, fine. So if this action that we are doing right now is based on the previous action, then what caused the action prior to that? And then one can say that I just happened to be, mm, you know, on my laptop browsing, and I came across this video, or I could be, oh, I have heard about your talks earlier, and then I'm subscribed to your channel, so hence I'm interested in what you're saying. Or I never heard you, I've been curious, okay, this topic is interesting, so I saw this topic, and then this made me come to this. So then that's the cause for the previous cause. Similarly, we can just go back for every action. We can say what caused that action in the past. And we can keep going back, because no action, if you look at it at scientifically, is not happening in itself. There is something in the so-called past which is creating that action. And if something in the past was got created, then there is something further down the past that created even that past action. And even the further down the past action, there is something further down the past that, and one can keep tracing back. So in a way, if any moment of life is happening right now, it is happening because a series of events have been unfolding to bring us to this moment. So this moment that is happening is an outcome of past moments or past events. So which means that this moment is not absolutely free of the past. This is a momentum of the past moments. One can say there is absolute freedom only when it is not determined by something else or influenced by something else. But if it is influenced by what happened in the past, then this is not absolute freedom. So when was the first action happen? Because that is where we need to then find what is really freedom. Was it the time then we were conceived in our mother's womb? That was that the first action? Or what about before that? The conception of our parents, our ancestors, and how behind do we go to find the first event that was the roller coaster for all the events to follow? Because all the events are interlinked to each other if we are looking at life in a so-called scientific way of cause and effect, which happens over a period of time. They say that the universe began 13.8 billion years back, scientifically. The Earth came into existence about 3.8 billion years back. Life on Earth came into existence 3.8 billion years back. The first life on the planet were microscopic organisms. So really, if we look at it scientifically, rationally, logically, whatever is happening each moment can trace its history back to something that began 13.8 billion years back. And hence, this moment where you are sitting and listening to this recording is happening because the universe unfolded the way it did 13.8 billion years back. And then we say, I am the maker of my destiny. I have free will. I am making choices. But our choices are ruled by whatever has happened in the past. So how can it be a free will or free choice if it is coming from the past? And particularly if we were to look at the past scientifically, it's coming from something that has happened, started 13.8 billion years back. And often I find, if when we say, oh, I made that choice, I did this, the universe probably would be rolling its eyes and smiling at our audacity to say that, oh, I am doing this. The universe would be thinking probably that it took me 13.8 billion years of evolution to come to this point of existence. And this tiny being who just came into existence 30 years back, 40 years back, 60 years back, is now saying he is an individual who is making those choices and making his life happen. And the universe is saying, it took me 13.8 billion years, and this guy just who's arrived as of a few moments back is saying, now I'm running the show. So that's uh, in a way looking at it scientifically through the lens of cause and effect, that do we really exercise free will and choice? Because all our choices are based on some things that have happened in the past. It's like a rolling ball. We didn't choose that, at least consciously we didn't choose that we will have this body manifested. We didn't choose that there will be consciousness, this consciousness manifested. Of course, we can create stories in the mind which will say that, oh, I chose this soul, I chose this body to learn lessons. And of course, that's also part of our mind and its meaning making process. But if we really look at it, one fine day, we experience that there is life, there is consciousness, and there's this body. That's how it is. The other thing that really challenges the concept of free will is the element of interdependence, which means that this whole universe is one. Now, what do I mean by this whole universe is one? The whole universe is made up of different forms, different species. There is the plants, there are the animals, there are birds, there is nature in the form of the sun, cloud, mountains, ocean, water bodies, and all of this are engaging with each other to create life. On its own, nothing can exist on its own. If the sun didn't rise, or if the sun was not at a certain distance from the earth, there would be no life on the planet. Or if the plants didn't give oxygen, there would be no life on the planet. Or if there were no water bodies like seas and ocean, which help to create the seasons and waterfall, rainfall and irrigation and cultivation, there would be no life. If the earth didn't rotate on its axis, there would be no seasons. All of this is in a way interdependent. This whole life is interdependent on each other for making life happen. So if somebody is saying that I am choosing to do something, then you are able to exercise that choice to do something only because everything else supported that choice. Everything else supported the life in you. Even our bodily functions, which are not actually a matter of choosing by the mind. The digestion is happening. The respiration is happening. The nervous system is happening. The blood circulation is happening. The heart is pumping, is happening. So there seems to be a larger life around me, in me, which is happening. If this larger life around me or in me didn't happen, then this so-called freedom and I will not be able to say I exercise free will and choice or I'm making choice. So my so-called freedom and free will is dependent on the whole universe to give life so that I can say that I am a person who exists and I exercise choice. So in which case, again, is my so-called willpower really free because it is dependent on other factors for its existence? Because life cannot exist independently on its own. Like one entity cannot say that, oh, I don't need anything to engage with. I am independent and autonomous on my own. Then, if there is absolute independence and autonomy, then one can say that I exercise absolute free will. But if you're dependent on so many factors for giving life and experiencing life, then that means it's not really free will, that will is influenced or determined or is dependent on so many other factors. So that's the other aspect, other than cause and effect, that this whole life, this whole universe works through interdependence. There's nothing that one thing can say that, I am independent. I don't need anything else to exist. I think that's the best way to put it. That I exist entirely on my own. If you exist entirely on your own, then you can say this, yes, I exercise absolute free will. So those two are the perhaps um, uh, ways that one can look at cause and effect. The past influences what choices we are making. Being part of the larger universe and being dependent on the larger universe also determines life and the choices that are being made. And the third part, and this is the interesting bit about, do we really have free will? How can we, when we say that we have free will, then we generally say that, oh, I did this, I chose this, mm, uh, I had these options. I had option A, option B, option C, and I chose option A and I did option A. I'm reminded of a joke, but I'm not going to talk about that joke right now because it will divert us. Mm. So the so I'll just tell you the joke in short. And there's this woman who's going about her work, and suddenly there is a voice which keeps warning her and says, "Don't do this, don't do this." And by listening to that voice, um, this woman is safe, is secure, and so it's always guiding. So then this woman is curious to know, what is this voice which is constantly guiding me? And it says, "Can you tell me, who are you?" So then the voice says, "I'm your guardian angel. Tell me if you want to know something." So the woman says, "The only thing I want to know is, where the hell were you when I was getting married?" Okay, so that's the joke. So, so coming back to how our notion of free will comes, our notion of free will comes because we think, I am thinking something. I think I have ABC, I have thought A, thought B, thought C, and I can choose between thought A, thought B, thought C, and I can execute an action between thought A, thought B, thought C. So our notion of free will is based on our ability to think. Just get this. This is really we are really coming to the core and the essence of it. My notion of free will is based on my ability to think, that I can choose to think and I can choose to uh, think of different choices available, and I can choose out of these choices one choice, and then hence I say I have free will and I can act upon the choice. Correct? Like and that's really how I think I have free will. Now, my simple question to you is, yes, all this we presuppose that we are doing, I am doing the thinking, I am doing the choosing, I am doing the action based on the choice, and hence. But if we really have free will, then we should even be able to exercise free will on the faculty of thinking itself. And what do I mean by that? If we really have free will, then we must be able to say, when I don't want to think, I can stop my thinking. Because most of the time, this mind of ours is like a non-stop radio churning thoughts morning to night without our permission, without our volition. And most of these thoughts, they say, we get 80,000 thoughts a day, which we are not even aware of. And they're just happening. It's not like wake up in the morning and I say that, oh, today I will think about this. We have no idea what thoughts are going to come next. Some thoughts come based on past memories. Some thoughts come because some events trigger those thoughts. It's just happening. One can actually just be sitting and just thinking is going on by itself. And most of this thinking is not even productive. It's tiring. Sometimes even it's destructive, self-judgmental. It causes so much fear, so much anxiety. So if we really have free will, then why would we want to have these thoughts which are not constructive, which are dysfunctional, which create anxiety? We would not want it. So then we must be able to exercise our free will and say, I can choose not to think when I don't want to. But we don't seem to have that ability to stop the thinking itself. Because if we really had free will, then we should be able to stop our thinking process, which is the cause which makes us believe we have free will in the first place. So neither can we choose, okay, I don't want to think about this. I want to think about this. That, I don't want it. Even that is not even in our control. Hmm. If I tell you stop thinking, you're not able to exercise free will to stop thinking. If I tell you don't think of a red monkey wearing a blue hat, then you will not be able to think of a red monkey wearing a blue hat, because that's what. So this is another aspect which should make us realize that this so-called thinking is not in our control, which creates the illusion that it is in our control, and we are thinking and we are making choices and we are acting on those choices. But this faculty of thinking itself is not in our control, then how can there be free will? I heard this somewhere. I've not really done much research on this, but I heard this somewhere. So I really don't know how valid this is. But as per research in neuroscience, they say the action happens first, and then immediately the thought happens, I did the action. Like supposing this happened, and then the thought comes, oh, I am raising my right hand. So the action is happening, and then immediately the thought is happening, oh, now. So the notion that I am choosing to do something or I'm doing something happens immediately after the action happens. So first the action happens. One can check and research whether this is what neuroscience is. I've just heard it in passing through in some of the YouTube videos. So uh, So all this challenges really the notion of a separate person who is making choices, who is doing things, who is in charge, who is in control, who is exercising free will. The whole element of all our choices are based on the past, cause and effect. So how can it be free will? All our choices are interdependent on the engagement and interaction with all other aspects of the universe. Then how can it absolutely be free will? We don't have choice over our own thoughts or the ability to stop our thinking itself. So then how can there be really free will? By now, I know this conversation would be, if you have stuck through this and you have listened till this, maybe making some people really uncomfortable. Because it's really challenging a very cherished belief most human beings have, that I have free will. I am a separate person who exercises choice. And whenever this notion is challenged, it creates a lot of disturbance. And primarily, there are two things that cause the disturbance. And at this point of time, primarily, people tend to ask generally two kinds of questions. But if you have more than that, then you can always write in the comments and let me know. And like I said, this session or this conversation is not trying to convince you that no, you must give up the notion that there is free will. No, I'm just sharing my realization. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to enlighten you. I'm not here to awaken you. I'm just simply sharing. The first thing then people ask at this point of time, okay, if there is no free will, then what is the motivation for me to do anything? I will just lie in bed. Nothing. I will do nothing. Why should I do anything? There is no, I am not doing anything. Life is happening by itself. Then I will not do anything, which is actually a very childish argument, honestly. Then do nothing. No, lie in bed whole day and see if you can do it. If you are a relatively healthy person, healthy in body, healthy in mind, it's almost impossible for you to lie in bed all day, in spite of listening to this whole recording, which is challenging the notion of free will and saying that life, in a way, what I'm actually trying to convey is life is happening by itself. There is no person who's doing it. Even our so-called choices, even our so-called actions, everything is happening through the element of life. So if you're healthy in body and mind, then it's I doubt, even if you listen to this, okay, fine, experiment lying in bed all day, 1 day, 2 day, 10 day. It's really, really difficult not to do anything, because the nature of life is like a river. It's flowing all the time. It is doing something all the time. Even when we are dreaming, even when we are sleeping, some action is happening. Life is still happening. Even when this so-called person is asleep, is disappears in sleep, still life is happening through the bodily functions. Only if you are severely clinically depressed, then perhaps you may not have the motivation to get out of bed. You just are sitting, doing nothing. But still, you can't say you're not doing anything, because you're still eating food, you're still going to the toilet. Still, the thoughts are going on, depressive thoughts are going on. And more importantly, you are not really lying in bed out of choice, but because you just don't have the willpower, so-called willpower, to exercise to do something. So this is really a very intellectual hypothetical argument that, oh, if there is really no free will, then I will do nothing. Then why do I need to motivate myself to do anything? Because it's not something you can choose not to do anything. That's really the problem of the human mind and the condition. It's constantly wanting to do something, do something, do something. It is believing it is doing something. And the second argument that generally happens when free will is questioned, and this one is a little serious argument, which is about morality. That if there is no free will, then I can go and kill somebody. I can rape somebody. I can rob somebody, because then I can say, oh, I'm not doing anything. It is life which is doing. Or I can abdicate total responsibility and say that, oh, I didn't do anything. Life did it. The, to respond to that uh, question of morality, one is just by listening to this talk or listening to any talk which questions or challenges the concept of free will, the person is, you are not going to go and do any of those things. Oh, I've listened that there is no free will, life is doing anything, now let me go and kill somebody, let me go and rob somebody. You're not going to do that. And the person who is meant to do that will do that irrespective of the fact whether he believes whether he's doing it or life is doing it. He does that any which way. And even if, let's say, you say that, oh, I am not doing any wrong action, life is doing it, then part of that life is that probably you'll be caught if you kill somebody and hanged. You'll be caught and you'll be sent to jail, and that's also part, that is also what life is doing. Because you can't simply say, oh, life is doing it, so why should I take any responsibility for it? Yes, so part of that whole life existence and happening and occurrences, that you will have to bear the consequences of your action, and that's also a function of life. So there's really no free lunch in that sense. Whether you're caught, whether if you're not caught, then you'll have to bear whatever thoughts, guilt, and whatever you'll have to of your actions, and that's also a part of life. So both these arguments, oh, if there is, I'm not the doer of action, then what is the motivation for me to do anything? If I'm not the doer of the action, then what about morality? What about responsibility? These are just hypothetical questions, really speaking. In reality, just by listening to this, the value of what I'm saying, I'll tell you why this can be helpful, if at all, for the purpose of, um, I don't like this word, even though I've just recently written an article on the title of this word, which is spiritual growth, mm, or spiritual evolution. Spiritual growth is simply realizing I am not the identity that my mind is creating by thoughts, which believes it's a separate person and who's exercising choices and doing something, but the realization that I am living presence and I am that one life in which is expressing itself in different forms and experiencing itself in different forms. So it is moving from the idea of separation to the not even an idea, to the realization of oneness. That is spiritual. If there is a goal to spirituality, then that's what it is. So one can experience this giving up of this notion of being a separate person when we are in that state of stillness. We are just sitting still and noticing, okay, breath happening, sensations happening, sounds happening, life happening, the experience of life also happening. There is no me who's separate, who's making and doing any of this which is happening. And the last bit that I want to share with you is, quite often what happens is that we we do something and then we either take the blame for it or we take the credit for it, which essentially means And I think this can be best explained through the medium of when we are totally absorbed in something and we lose this sense of identity, this sense of time and space. And we all have some things which help us to get in touch with that timeless dimension. For somebody, maybe it's expressing yourself through some sport. For somebody, it could be expressing yourself through some art and creativity. For somebody, it could be like, for me, it's teaching. And for me, it is writing. Mm. For each person, it is different. When we are doing that, we lose the fact that I am doing this. It feels there's so much absorption in that moment that it is happening by itself. It's the word that they generally use for it is flow, as though there's just emptiness and then you just the flow. The universe is making it happen. In that moment, there is no person who is doing it. When that moment ends, which is when there's complete absorption and oneness in the moment, when that moment ends, then you may go back and then you'll say, oh, I did that. Wow, I created such a great art. Oh, I played such a great sport. Oh, I wrote such a lovely article. In that moment, it just happened. It was a very spontaneous expression of life. But when the mind comes with its thoughts, then it says, oh, I did it. And the same, it could be, oh, I didn't do a good job, I did a good job, or whatever. Then the mind comes and says, but when there is complete oneness in the moment, complete unity with life, complete unity with existence, then life is expressing by itself. When the mind and the thought comes, then comes the notion of I am a separate person, I did this, or I am doing this. Which is what I often say. You can either choose to live your life as a person, which means constantly chattering mind, thinking mind, person. I'm doing this. What should I do? What should I do? What is going to happen in the past? What happened in the future? Blah, 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 blah. This is how a person lives. Or you can live your life as life itself, which is silence. Nothing. In the silence, things are happening. The body is moving. Actions are happening. There's no person doing it. It's happening. It's like there's a quote, in the Zen quote, before enlightenment, chopping wood, fetching water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, fetching water. Only difference is earlier you are doing it as a person with constant chatter. After that, you're doing it as silence. Life is doing it. Now, some of you may at this juncture, now that we're coming almost towards the end of this session, I'm going to say, okay, fine, what you're saying makes sense. I get it. Now, how can I be free of this notion or illusion of doership, that I am the doer? Now, what can I really do? Now, that becomes like a paradoxical question itself, because if you are going to do something, you're only going to perpetuate your identity as the doer of the action. You're only going to strengthen your identity that I am someone who's doing something and who's going to achieve the goal that I am not a doer, which is actually a contradiction of sorts. It's like, what do I need to do to come into the here and now? Nothing. Anything you try to do will take you away from the here and now, which is this pure existence, which is life. And then if I give you 10 steps, okay, do step 1, step 2, step 10, and this will free you from the illusion of doership. And then I entered into the domain of gurudom, and I am not a guru or anything. All I'm doing is I'm sharing some things I have realized from my own experience. They may be helpful for somebody who is receptive to it. Maybe if you're not receptive, then maybe this is not what you need to hear. Maybe your path and your journey may be different, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe at this point of time, you don't need this whatever I'm sharing in your life. If you need it, then it becomes wisdom. If you don't need it, then it's just nonsense. But if I were to share, there's one thing that has been helpful for me. Mm, and like I say that if at all, assume that, okay, if at all, let's assume that there is free will. Let us assume there is free will. Then that free will, the best exercise of that free will, to finally realize that there is no free will, is to shift your attention from unconscious thoughts into awareness as often as you can. So let's say you have free will. Then just use your free will only for this. This is the most auspicious use of free will. Take your attention from unconscious thoughts, where it is 99% of the time, into its story and this person and the past and the future and things and this, and shift your attention into silence, awareness, presence, this moment. And do that. And use your so called free will to keep remembering that I am not this person created by the mind. There is presence, there is life, there's awareness, there's existence, without any goal, without any agenda, functioning intelligently by itself. And that's really until the realization also happens that this shifting of attention also happens by itself. Sometimes it goes into unconscious thinking, and sometimes it naturally comes back into awareness. There is no person choosing to do either of this activity also. And that at that point of time, then there's an awakening that really even that is also, there is no practitioner of awareness. There is no chooser choosing to be aware. Awareness happens, awareness gets lost. Awareness happens, awareness gets lost. But that time you realize that there is no person who is doing any of this. So so that's what I had to share today on this topic of, do we have free will? And if you have stuck through this recording until now and you have heard this whole recording, then I'm sure it has given you some food for thought. But more than food for thought, I would say the purpose of every session, actually, if you really look at that, I talk about, is really eventually at the end of it, I say, come back into presence, come back to awareness, come back to silence. I use different words. That's really the purpose. So if this conversation triggers more thoughts, oh, is there free will, is there destiny, I must find out, I mean, then the purpose of this conversation is lost. The purpose of this conversation is not to trigger more thoughts and create a conceptual pursuit in your mind to find out whether there is destiny, free will, and there is really no conceptual answer to this. The real answer lies in presence, and the presence, the more there is presence in life, more the realization strengthens that this presence is working by itself. This consciousness is expressing itself on its own naturally. So, with that, we come to the end of this difficult, relatively difficult session to talk about, but it just emerged and then it needed expression. And so here it is. So, with that, we end today's session. Let's end it with a small prayer, as we generally do. You can close your eyes, join your palms in Namaste if you wish. My dear higher self, help me to realize I'm not a separate person born in time with the past and a future created by thoughts. I am this living presence, consciousness, existence. I am one with the whole of life, expressing itself in different forms. Help me to realize this oneness through the practice of presence and awareness and silence. I seek your grace and guidance to realize my true self. Om Shanti. Okay, so with that, we end today's session. I'll see you all in the next session. Goodbye. God bless. Take care.